was about 1.5 years ago now that I was falsely accused by someone that my husband and I both trusted and served with in leadership at our church. And I didn't know that he had actually been talking to other people behind my back and even talking with church leaders about me. And so by the time I was brought into a meeting, I was met with a list of just dates and vague accusations. And even I remember asking for clarifications on these because he would say things like, on March, whatever date, you were rude when speaking to me. And I was basically told that in asking questions, I was being defensive and I just needed to change because I was ruining things in the church, and that I was going to be removed from my leadership position as the worship director if I didn't. And it was at actually the last meeting with him in leadership that he ramped up, and I had brought up something that he had specifically wrote about me in a letter to my husband, and he literally ended up just quitting on the spot from his leadership position. And he and his family ended up moving to another state within, I think it was about a month or so. And the 2 remaining church leaders essentially decided to ignore any accountability and kind of save the image of the church name. So in the end of that, our family and actually some other families who had been affected in their own interactions had left the church. And once their family had moved and we had left, I pretty much thought it was over, but it wasn't. And over about the next 6 months or so, we were getting contacted by people, and we live in a small rural community, so everyone knows everyone. But they were saying that members of his family were contacting them and saying certain things about me and my family. And it was interesting too, because the people who did reach out to us were it didn't sound like, who you guys are, and we just want to hear your side of the story type thing. And then on the flip side of that, there were other people that we knew that just quietly stopped engaging with us. And we even heard something that people were saying we were a cult because we were continuing to hold a weekly Bible study at our house after we had stopped attending their church. In those early days after we had stopped attending the church, whenever someone would come to us and ask, we would share the truth, but otherwise we pretty much just stayed silent and prayed because God knew, and really what else are we going to do? So after a while, the unjustness of it got to me a bit, and it was just, as more and more people had contacted us, it just became apparent he and his family are trying to play some sort of game or win something, but what? I don't know. It doesn't really make sense. And just as I turned to God in prayer, and I remember one day he brought to my mind something that a friend of mine had said a while back, and she said, you tend to your integrity and let God handle your reputation. And God reminded me, just with other scriptures too, as I spent time in the Word, and he really began to solidify a specific position, and I could try to chase down every lie and rumor and attempt to defend myself or clear my name in a sense, or I could focus on my own integrity and let God be my defender and let him handle my reputation. And I knew that he was leading me to choose integrity, and so I did. And it wasn't easy at first because in my flesh, choosing integrity wasn't going to bring about justice. But over time, and especially after writing this song and making a demo for myself to listen to, this really has become second nature. I don't care what people want to say or think about me because I know that lies aren't true. And more importantly, I know that God knows what's true. And anyone is free to choose to say or do or believe whatever they want. And I am free to choose to only be affected by what God thinks about me. Because ultimately, if I were to choose to chase down the gossip and rumors and essentially try to set a record straight, what does that gain me? It only gains a whole lot of stress, and quite honestly, that would just be operating in my pride and trying to like protect my own self-image. And it would serve as a distraction from things that God has actually called me to do. And I don't want to live distracted or in pride. I want to be a faithful steward with what God has entrusted to me. And ironically, God used this situation for good in this very music ministry, because what they meant for evil, God used to clear my schedule. And He gave a very clear vision for self-producing music to help other people meditate on the truth of Scripture with these fun and catchy melodies. And so the choice was very clear. And over time, it has become easier to walk in. And I really love this part in verse 2, that as I was writing, I really couldn't have imagined how good that melody would become. The lyric line is, "If I waste my time on every rumor, it would wear me down just like a cruel tumor." And then immediately it shifts and refocuses on God with, "My God's thoughts of me are what matter most. So I won't fear the gossip people boast." And then, of course, that repeated chorus, "I'll focus on my own integrity." And now, whenever I hear more gossip about what's being said about us, I just sing my song in my head. I refocus on truth and that like resolution that I've already chosen. And I can smile and keep running my race with integrity.